And we're live on Facebook. We're reading Ozma of Oz. Oh, we're live on YouTube too. All right.
YouTube.
Reading Ozma of Oz. We're starting with the Princess Langwidere chapter.
And I'm chewing gum.
That's sure.
Because I'm not in school.
Yes, there you go. And it's 10 o'clock, so it's much later than your bedtime. But yeah, you're not in school right now. But yeah, so we're reading Ozma of Oz. We've been reading Ozma of Oz for a while now. We are on the Princess Langwidere. The chapter is called The Heads of Langwidere. We just got through the Wheelers section. Remember the Wheelers? What happened with the Wheelers?
So creeped me out.
Very creepy. So just to recap, Dorothy crashed on the coast of the Kingdom of Ev, and she met, or she had Bellina, the talking. She crashed inside of a chicken coop, and Bellina was there. And she met Tick-Tock the robot. And then they met the Wheelers, people with wheels for hands, who were very, very creepy. And I've talked about the Wheelers. So we're moving on to Princess Langwidere. If you thought the Wheelers were creepy and horrifying, just wait till you see Langwidere. If you're familiar with Return to Oz, the 1985 cinematic masterpiece, one of my favorite movies of all time, this is the character they call Princess Mombi. Mombi is the witch from book 2. Princess Langwidere is a very different character in book 3. Return to Oz just mashed them together for some reason. But the character in Return to Oz is basically the same character. So they just called her Mombi. Okay, so they're going away from the Wheelers. This is just Dorothy, Tick-Tock, and Bellina. That's her traveling company there. Let's see. There is no ruler, was the answer. Because every member of the royal family is imprisoned by the Gnome King. But the Princess Langwidere, who is the niece of our late King Ubaldo, lives in a part of the royal palace and takes as much money out of the royal treasury as she can spend. The Princess Langwidere is not exactly a ruler, you see, because she doesn't rule, but she is the nearest approach to a ruler we have at present. I don't remember her, said Tick-Tock. What does she look like? They're talking to Wheelers at this point. Tick-Tock has beaten up all the Wheelers, and so now they're having a conversation. I do not remember. What does she look like? That I cannot say, replied the Wheeler, although I have seen her 20 times. For the Princess Langwidere is a different person every time I see her, and the only way her subjects can recognize her at all is by means of a beautiful ruby key, which she always wears on a chain attached to her left wrist. When we see the key, we know we are beholding the princess. That is strange, said Dorothy in astonishment. Do you mean to say that so many different princesses are one and the same person? Not exactly, answered the Wheeler. There is, of course, but one princess, but she appears to us in many forms, which are all more or less beautiful. She must be a witch, exclaimed the girl. I do not think so, declared the Wheeler, but there is some mystery connected with her nevertheless. She is a very vain creature and lives mostly in a room surrounded by mirrors so that she can admire herself whichever way she looks. No one answered this speech because they had just passed out of the forest and their attention was fixed upon the scene before them, a beautiful vale in which there were many fruit trees and green fields with pretty farmhouses scattered here and there and broad, smooth roads that led in every direction. In the center of this lovely vale, about a mile from where our friends were standing, rose the tall spires of the royal palace, which glittered brightly against their background of blue sky. The palace was surrounded by charming grounds full of flowers and shrubbery. Several tinkling fountains could be seen, and there were pleasant walks bordered by rows of marble statuary. All these details Dorothy was, of course, unable to notice or admire until they had advanced along the road to a position quite near to the palace. She was still looking at the pretty sights with her little party entered the grounds and approached the big front door of the king's own apartments. To their disappointment, they found the door tightly closed. A sign was tacked to the panel which reads, "Owner absent. Please knock at the door in the left wing." But something, while he's preoccupied elsewhere, something just to notice about just the setting of Ozma of Oz, the whole land. Just getting some ginger ale.
Yes, I swallowed my gum.
Oh, okay.
So.
And that doesn't hurt you. We know that. It's all right. It's not the best thing to do, but it's not going to hurt you. But the whole country of Ev is sort of abandoned. It sort of reminds me of the streets now with the quarantine, where there's nobody in the streets. Since the whole royal family of Ev has been taken by the Gnome King. If you hear sounds over here, he's knocking over things. So anyway,
Accident.
That's all right. That's all right. So the whole royal family is gone, so it's sort of anarchy in the kingdom of Ev. So you have the Wheelers, who are these crazy creatures who are roaming the streets and terrorizing people, and you have Princess Langwidere, who's the only royal in the kingdom, and she's horrible. Oh, we got disconnected. Oh, there we go. Here we are. We're Are you gonna be still?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
trying to sit.
Now that I've talked about that, but the version in Return to Oz has a bunch of statues everywhere. It sort of gets that image with a bunch of statues, which is much more of a reference to Narnia. So if you're familiar with Narnia, that's the White Witch. But the White Witch is a fantastic example. My students, I have them read part of Mad Woman in the Attic. White Witch is a perfect example of that Mad Woman in the Attic. Princess Langwidere is kind of just a small part of the story. But she's kind of similar in some ways to the White Witch, but any sort of evil witch that you notice, she's more powerful than the Wicked Witch of the West in some ways. But anyway, gonna stop rambling. Now, said Tick-Tock to the captive Wheeler, you must show us the way to the left wing. Very well, agreed the prisoner. It is around here at the right. How can the left wing be at the right? Demanded Dorothy, who feared the Wheeler was fooling them. Because there used to be 3 wings, and 2 were torn down, so the one on the right is the only one left. It is a trick of the Princess Langwidere to prevent visitors from annoying her. Then the captive led them around to the wing, after which the machine man, having no further use for them, now counted the doors in the wings and knocked loudly upon the 3rd one. And here's Princess Langwidere when we first meet her. It's the John Arneal illustration.
I want to see.
It's kind of small. There you go. There's Princess Langwidere.
Oh.
She looks harmless.
True. Yes.
If that's Princess Langwidere. Tick-Tock now counted the door. It was opened by a little maid in a cap. Oh, that's not Princess Langwidere.
It's not. It's
Princess
not.
Langwidere. Princess Langwidere in the Return to Oz version, she's very, very creepy. But here she is, putting on the heads. There you go.
Okay, can I?
Spoiler alert. This is why she's very creepy and very scary. The whole thing. We'll see. Okay, there's a tease for what's coming up. Hold that. You'll see. Hold on.
Okay, thanks.
Now I am her servant. So yeah, that's her servant. Sorry, I got that mixed up. Are you the Princess Langwidere? Asked Dorothy. No, miss, I am her servant, replied the maid. May I see the princess, please? I will tell her you are here, miss, and ask her to grant you an audience, said the maid. Step in, please, and take a seat in the drawing room. So Dorothy walked in, followed closely by the machine, but as the yellow hen tried to enter after them, the little maid cried, shoo, and flapped her apron in Bellina's face. So with Bellina, that's just always something to keep in mind. Bellina's always just belittled by everybody and dismissed by everybody. Shoo yourself. retorted the hen, drawing back in anger and ruffling up her feathers. Haven't you any better manners than that? Oh, do you talk? Inquired the maid, evidently surprised. Can't you hear me? Snapped Bellina. Drop that apron and get out of the doorway so that I may enter with my friends. The princess won't like it, said the maid, hesitating. I don't care whether she likes it or not, replied Bellina, and fluttering her wings with a loud noise, she flew straight at the maid's face. The little servant at once ducked, and the hen reached Dorothy's side in safety. Very well, sighed the maid. If you are all ruined because of this obstinate hen, don't blame me for it. It isn't safe to annoy the Princess Langwidere. Tell her we are waiting, if you please, Dorothy requested with dignity. Bellina is my friend and must go wherever I go. Classic Dorothy. Without more words, the maid led them to a richly furnished drawing room lighted with subdued rainbow tints and came in through beautiful stained glass windows. So the prominence of the rainbow, I have the rainbow circle sitting over here.
Rainbow circle.
The prominence of the rainbow in the movie, rainbows really don't come up really until the daughter of the rainbow. And the daughter of the rainbow, I think, is book 5. Polychrome, the rainbow's daughter. We can read through to book 5. But Polychrome, the rainbow's daughter, is really the first time rainbows have a really prominent place, but they don't have nearly as prominent a place as the movie gives them. Somewhere over the rainbow, of course. Remain here, she said. What name shall I give the princess? I am Dorothy Gale of Kansas, replied the child. And the gentleman is a machine named Tick-Tock, and the yellow hen is my friend Bellina. The little servant bowed and withdrew, going through several passages and mounting 2 marble stairways before she came to the apartments occupied by her mistress. Princess Langwidere's sitting room was paneled with great mirrors, which reached from the ceiling to the floor. Also, the ceiling was composed of mirrors, and the floor was of polished silver that reflected every object upon it. So when Langwidere sat in her easy chair and played soft melodies upon her mandolin, her form was mirrored hundreds of times in walls and ceiling and floor, and whichever way the lady turned her head, she could see and admire her own features. This she loved to do, and just as the maid entered, she was saying to herself, this head with the auburn hair and hazel eyes is quite attractive. I must wear it more often than I have done of late, although it may not be the best in my collection. You have company, your highness, announced the maid, bowing low. Who is it? Asked Langwidere, yawning. Dorothy Gale of Kansas, Mr. Tick-Tock, and Bellina, answered the maid. What a queer lot of names, murmured the princess. She's one to talk. Her name's Langwidere.
Wait, what?
She just says they have weird names, which is a funny thing for someone in Oz to say. They all have kind of funny names. What are they like? Is Dorothy Gale of Kansas pretty? She might be called so, the maid replied. And is Mr. Tick-Tock attractive? Continued the princess. That I cannot say, your highness, but he seems very bright. Will your gracious highness see them? Oh, I may as well, Nanda. Okay, so the maid's name is Nanda.
Oh.
Nanda or Nanda, I don't know.
Okay.
Nanda, I don't know, Nanda. But I am tired of admiring this head, my best appearance, don't you? Your number 17 is exceedingly beautiful, answered Nanda with another bow. Again, the princess yawned. Then she said, help me to rise. So the maid assisted her to gain her feet, although Langwidere was the stronger of the two, and then the princess slowly walked across the silver floor to her cabinet, leaning heavily at every step upon Nanda's arm. Now I must explain to you that this is the narrator, one neck. These heads were kept in what she called her cabinet, which was a beautiful dressing room that lay just between Langwidere's sleeping chamber and the mirrored sitting room. Each head was in a separate cupboard lined with velvet. The cupboards ran all around the sides of the dressing room and had elaborately carved doors with gold numbers on the outside and jeweled framed mirrors on the inside of them.
That's really, 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 really creepy.
Yeah, it is. You are correct, sir.
I
agree.
hate it a lot.
Well, you'll see what happens. There you go. When the princess got out of her crystal bed in the morning, she went to her cabinet, opened one of the velvet-lined cupboards, and took the head it contained from the golden shelf. Then, by the aid of the mirror inside the open door, she put on the head as neat and straight as could be, and afterward called her maids to robe her for the day. She always wore a simple white costume that suited all the heads. For being able to change her face whenever she liked, the princess had no interest in wearing a variety of gowns, as have other ladies who are compelled to wear the same face constantly. Of course, the 30 heads were in great variety. No two formed alike, but all being of exceeding loveliness. There were heads with golden hair, brown hair, rich auburn hair, and black hair, but none with gray hair. The heads had eyes of blue, of gray, of hazel, of brown, of black, but there were no red eyes among them, and all were bright and handsome. The noses were Grecian, Roman. I'm not even sure how to pronounce this particular word. Representing all types of beauty, Retrousse. The mouths were of assorted sizes and shapes, displaying pearly teeth when the head smiled. As for dimples, they appeared in cheeks and chins. This is the part that we're talking about. I showed you that one already. She's taking her own head off. There you go. Okay.
How can she live?
It's Oz. It's a magical place. That's the answer. I don't know. There's no real explanation.
How can she see?
Good question. I don't know. But I mean, this is a place where a scarecrow comes to life and he knows things already. I mean, it's just magical. I mean, that's the only explanation you really need. One key, my charming, wherever they might be most charming. And one or two heads had freckles upon the faces to contrast the better with the brilliancy of their complexions. One key unlocked all the velvet cupboards containing these treasures, a curious key carved from a single blood-red ruby, and this was fastened to a strong but slender chain, which the princess wore around her left wrist. And rubies, of course, big part of the movie, not really in the book, the 39 movie, I should say. When Nanda had supported Langwidere to a position in front of the cupboard number 17, the princess unlocked the door with her ruby key, and after handing her dark eyes and a lovely pearl and white complexion, and when Langwidere wore it, she knew she was remarkably beautiful in appearance. There was only one trouble with number 17, the temper that went with it. So all of the heads also have personalities. So where do those personalities come from?
I think all of them would be scared because all of them are being chopped off by Gachete.
Yes.
They'd be scared.
Yes, where did she get the heads? From people. Where did the heads get the personalities? From the people that she decapitated.
Yeah, why aren't they all scared? Why aren't they all scared?
That's probably the mood that they were in when they got their head
why aren't they all scared?
Well, we'll see Dorothy in just a second. She's about to get threatened. But okay. But the temper that went with it, and which was hidden somewhere under the glossy black hair, was fiery, harsh, and haughty in the extreme, and it often led the princess to do unpleasant things which she regretted when she came to wear her other heads. This is a great head to wear. She's already a person who decapitates people. Well, yeah. Now she's extra angry. Yeah. But she did not remember this today and went to meet her guests in the drawing room with a feeling of certainty that she would surprise them with her beauty.
No,
however,
weird.
Oh, Dorothy. That's just Dorothy. This is Dorothy. This is just a standard John Arneal illustration of Dorothy. She looks very different from the 39 movie, that's for sure.
Looks different from what I remember.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know the 39 movie. Well, when the 39 movie came out with Judy Garland, every other version of Dorothy basically looked like that. But the original version of Dorothy, she was blonde. She wore a different kind of outfit.
True.
This one even looks different from the I mean, this is getting nitpicky, but this one looks different from the W.W. Denslow illustration in book 1. W.W. Denslow. The original illustrator was named W.W. Denslow, and he illustrated Dorothy a bit different from this one. But it all comes down to the fact that Judy Garland put on a wig, didn't quite look right, so they took the wig off and used her actual hair. So this is why we think of Dorothy as being brunette. Not really important information. I'm just throwing that out there. However, she was greatly disappointed to find that her visitors were merely a small girl in a gingham dress, a copper man that would only go when wound up, and a yellow hen that was sitting contentedly in Langwidere's best work basket, where there was a china egg used for darning stockings. China egg used for darning stockings. Oh, so, forget it. Oh, said Langwidere, slightly lifting the nose of number 7 cackle you ever heard. As for TikTok, so Dorothy's always very proud. I mean, she's a good person, but she's also a very, very confident person. Stop, commanded the princess with an angry flash of her splendid eyes. How dare you annoy me with your senseless chatter? Why, you horrid thing, said Dorothy, who was not accustomed to being treated so rudely. The princess looked at her more closely. Tell me, she resumed, are you of royal blood? Better than that, ma'am, said Dorothy. I came from Kansas. There you go.
Kansas?
That's where she came from. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. That's the famous line. Cried the princess scornfully. You are a foolish child, and I cannot allow you to annoy me. Run away, you little goose, and bother someone else. Dorothy was so indignant that for a moment she could find no words to reply, but she rose from her chair and was about to leave the room when the princess, who had been scanning the girl's face, stopped her by saying more gently, Come nearer to me. Dorothy obeyed without a thought of fear and stood before the princess. What's that?
I said, don't do it.
I know.
Chop off your head with a machete.
She's going to chop off your head with a machete. Yes. While Langwidere examined her face with careful attention. You are rather attractive, said the lady presently. Not at all beautiful, you understand, but you have a certain style of prettiness that is different from that of any of my 30 heads. So I believe I'll take your head and give you number 26 for it. Well, I believe you won't, exclaimed Dorothy. Take that, Langwidere.
Yeah. I'll chop off your head. That won't do anything. That won't do anything.
Yeah,
That won't do anything.
She has a temporary head, so I don't know how good that will do.
Yeah.
It will do you no good to refuse, continued the princess, for I need your head for my collection. And in the land of Ev, my will is law. I never have cared much for number 26, and you will find that it is very little worn. Besides, it will do you just as well as the one you're wearing for all practical purposes. I don't know anything about your number 26, and I don't want to, said Dorothy firmly. I'm not used to taking cast-off things, so I'll just keep my own head.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I go with her. I'd like to keep my own head. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for real. Yes, Dorothy's not gonna surrender without a fight. That's for sure.
True.
That's Dorothy.
I wouldn't. It's
I know.
My head.
How are you just gonna let somebody take your head? Well, she's offering a different head, somebody else's head. So she's not gonna lose a head. She's just gonna get somebody else's head. But still, that's horrible. That's horrible.
True. Yeah. She'll either be more smart, or she'll have a different brain.
She'll have a different brain. Yeah.
So she won't be as smart as she was.
I know, but see, here's kind of the deep question to think about: would she still be the same person if she had somebody else's head?
No, probably not.
So who is Langwidere then? She has 30 heads. So who is she? There's a deep question. There's a deep question to think about. Who are we as human beings? What defines us?
There's a comment.
That's just saying people are watching. That's all. What defines a human being? Is it his or her mind?
Or their
If you changed brains, would you be the same person?
No. Or change.
Or yes, or no.
Or soul.
Yes.
Or soul.
Yeah.
Or change.
What is a soul? These are deep questions for a kid's book to make you think about.
You can't even see your soul.
That's true. That's true. So if your brain changed, would your soul go with it? Maybe. Or would it stay with your body? These are deep questions.
Or even is your soul? That's another deep. That's another
deep question. There are a lot of deep questions.
I'd probably say in your body.
Yeah.
Your body, really. No, your body's just your stomach and this upper part.
Yeah. Your viscerous.
Yeah, so I'd say
your trunk, I guess you'd say. So is it your trunk or is it your head?
Yeah, head. I don't know. I'd say your soul's in your head.
Sure. These are deep questions to think about.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, the Oz books make you think about what is a personality and where does it come from and what is your mind. Epistemology, if you want to know the big fancy word for that. Where does an intellect come from? Anyway, going back to the book for some more deep thoughts. You refuse, said the princess with a frown. Of course I do, was the reply. She didn't even think about it for a second or get scared for a second.
Yeah, what?
But that's Dorothy. She's tough. Yeah. Then said Langwidere, I shall lock you up in the tower until you decide to obey me. Nanda, turning to the maid, call my army. Nanda rang the silver bell, and at once a big fat colonel in a bright red uniform entered the room, followed by 10 lean soldiers who all looked sad and discouraged and saluted the princess in a very melancholy fashion. Do you know what melancholy means? Mm-hmm. Melancholy is a good word. Melancholy just means sad. I mean, it's just a good word to know. So why do you think the soldiers are sad?
Because because she said she's gonna chop off their heads if they don't work for her.
Well, yeah, she's working for a lady who's chopping people's heads off, so I'm not sure. To hear is to obey, answered the big red column, looking both dazed and very much astonished. Help, he shouted, and the 10 lean soldiers sprang to assist their leader. There was great excitement for the next few moments, and Tick-Tock had knocked down 7 of the army who were sprawling in every direction upon the carpet, when suddenly the machine paused with the dinner pail raised for another blow and remained perfectly motionless. My action has run down, he called to Dorothy. Wind me up, quick. She tried to obey, but the big colonel had by this time managed to get upon his feet again, and he grabbed fast hold of the girl, and she was helpless to escape. This is too bad, said the run down faster than usual. Well, it can't be helped, said Dorothy with a sigh. Will you exchange heads with me? Demanded the princess. No, indeed. Because she's Dorothy.
Yeah,
no.
I want to eat.
I know, really. No, indeed, cried Dorothy. Then lock her up, said Langwidere to her soldiers, and they led Dorothy to a high tower.
That's better than having your head cut off.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a choice between the two.
I would pick being locked up.
I know, really. And locked her securely within. The soldiers afterwards tried to lift Tick-Tock, but they found the machine so solid and heavy that they could not stir it. So they left him standing in the center of the drawing room. People will think I have a new statue, said Langwidere, so it won't matter in the least, and Nanda can keep him well polished. What shall we do with the hen? Asked the colonel, who had just discovered Bellina in the work basket. Everybody always forgets about Bellina. Put her in the chicken house, answered the princess. Someday I'll have her fried for breakfast. She looks rather tough, your highness, said Nanda doubtfully. There's a double meaning to tough there for sure. Like if you're eating chicken and it's tough, or if she's a tough character. Bellina's a very tough character for sure. That is a base slander, cried Bellina, struggling frantically in the colonel's arms. But the breed of chickens I come from is said to be poison to all princesses.
What?
She's making it up, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Bellina's very sassy. Then remarked Langwidere, I will not fry the hen, but keep her to lay eggs, and if she doesn't do her duty, I'll have her drowned in the horse trough.
Can chickens swim?
I doubt it. I don't know. I don't know enough about chickens, but I seriously doubt it. I have no idea. That's a deep question. Can chickens swim? Where does personality come from? And can chickens swim? These are very deep questions. All right. So you want to find out what happens and how Dorothy gets out?
Sure.
This is in the next chapter. The chapter title kind of gives it away, so I'm not gonna spoil it. I'm not gonna spoil it. It tells you how she gets out.
I just want to see it. Why can I just see it?
Well, it spoils it. This is something Baum does all the time.
I want to see it.
He spoils the plot with the chapter titles. Okay, you can see. I won't spoil it for the viewers at home. I mean, if you look at the table of contents, you kind of know what happens.
I think I know what's going to happen.
Well, hold that thought. Nanda brought Dorothy bread and water for her supper, and she slept upon a hard stone couch with a single pillow and a silken coverlet. In the morning, she leaned out of the window of her prison in the tower to see if there was any way to escape. The room was not so very high up when compared with our modern buildings, but it was far enough above the trees and farmhouses to give her a good view of the surrounding country. To the east, she saw the forest with the sands beyond it and the ocean beyond that. There was even a dark speck upon the shore that she thought might be the chicken coop in which she had arrived at the singular country. Singular just meaning weird. Then she looked to the north and saw a deep but narrow valley lying between two rocky mountains and a third mountain that shut off the valley at the farther end. Westward, the fertile land of Ev suddenly ended a little way from the palace, and the girl could see miles and miles of sandy desert that stretched further than her eyes could reach. It was this desert, she thought, with much interest, that alone separated her from the wonderful land of Oz. And she remembered sorrowfully that she had been told no one had ever been able to cross the dangerous waste but herself. Once a cyclone had carried her across it, and a magical pair of silver shoes had carried her back again. But now she had neither a cyclone nor silver shoes to assist her, and her condition was sad indeed, for she had become a prisoner of a disagreeable princess who insisted that she must exchange her head for another one that was not that she was not used to, which might not fit her at all. Really, there seemed no hope of help for her from her old friends in the land of Oz. Thoughtfully, she gazed from her narrow window on all the desert. Not a living thing was stirring. Wait, though. Something surely was stirring. What's it gonna be?
Cyclone. I'm just kidding.
That would be interesting. Something her eyes had not observed at first. Now it seemed like a cloud. Now it seemed like a spot of silver. Now it seemed to be a mass of rainbow colors that moved swiftly towards her. Again, there's the rainbows. Now it seemed like a cloud. Now it seemed like a spot of silver. What could it be, she wondered. Then gradually, but in a brief space of time, nevertheless, the vision drew near enough to Dorothy to make out what it was. A broad green carpet was unrolling itself upon the desert, while advancing across the carpet was a wonderful procession that made the girl open her eyes in amazement as she gazed. First came a magnificent golden chariot drawn by a great lion and an immense tiger. Can you guess who that lion might be?
The lion from the first book?
Yes, the Cowardly Lion, who stood shoulder to shoulder and trotted along as gracefully as well-matched team of thoroughbred horses. And standing upright within the chariot was a beautiful girl, clothed in flowing robes of silver gauze and wearing a jeweled diadem. Remember what a diadem is? We found that out from Harry Potter. Remember what it was? The diadem of...
box.
What's that?
The giant box thing?
It's the crown. It's the crown of Ravenclaw.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, the diadem of Ravenclaw is a big plot point in the last book.
Okay. Who's that?
Who's that with the diadem?
Yeah.
This is the picture on the cover.
I just want
Can you guess who that is?
No.
What's the title of the book?
Ozma?
Yeah. It's Ozma.
Who's Ozma?
The princess. Well, she's the queen. Sometimes they call her princess, but technically she's the queen. She's the queen of Oz. I think there's no higher rank than princess. I think that's how it works. But anyway, she's the ruler of Oz. You look skeptical. She is. She's the ruler of Oz. So she's coming to save Dorothy. She's coming to save the royal family of Ebb, actually. Diadem upon her dainty head. She held in one hand the satin ribbons that guided her astonishing team, and in the other an ivory wand that separated at the top into two prongs, the prongs being tipped by the letters O and Z, made of glistening diamonds set closely together. The girl seemed neither older nor larger than Dorothy herself, and at once the prisoner in the tower guessed that the lovely driver of the chariot must be that Ozma of Oz, of whom she had so lately heard from TikTok. Following close behind the chariot, Dorothy saw her old friend the Scarecrow, riding calmly astride a wooden sawhorse, which pranced and trotted as naturally as any meat horse could have done. And the sawhorse showed up in book 2. Following close behind the chariot. And then came Nick Chopper, the Tin Woodman, with his funnel-shaped cap tipped carelessly.
Wait,
the Tin Woodman. His name is Nick Chopper.
Tin Woodman?
You remember the Tin Woodman?
Well, I forgot.
It's the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, the Cowardly Lion. Those are the 30 companions. Guy covered in silver.
Why?
We were just playing a game with a lot of puns. Well, if you think about it, he's got an axe. So, Chopper is the easy one.
Oh.
But Nick is to chop something is to nick it. Anyway, it's a pun. It's a very silly pun. With his funnel-shaped cap tipped carelessly over his left ear, his gleaming axe over his right shoulder, and his whole body sparkling as brightly as it had ever done in the old days when first she knew him. The Tin Woodman was on foot, marching at the head of a company of 27 soldiers, of whom some were lean and some fat, some short and some tall, but all the 27 were dressed in handsome uniforms of various designs and colors, no two being alike in any respect. Behind the soldiers, the green carpet rolled itself up again, so that there was always just enough of it for the procession to walk upon, in order that their feet might not come in contact with the deadly, life-destroying sand of the desert. Dorothy knew at once it was a magic carpet she beheld, and her heart beat high with hope and joy. She realized she was soon to be rescued and allowed to greet her dearly beloved, cue the Prince song, dearly beloved friends of Oz, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion. So here's the John Arneal illustration. One of my favorite John Arneal illustrations, if you see. Cowardly Lion. That's the Hungry Tiger. We'll see him in a second. Ozma, Scarecrow, the Sawhorse, the Tin Man.
I see.
I will show the audience at home in just a second. But it's one of my favorite John Arneal illustrations. But I think if you recognize just the prominence of very powerful female characters.
Tin Woodman?
The Tin Man. The Tin Man.
Why is there other people?
Those are the soldiers from Oz.
Ew.
Anyway, but it's just a great image of just how powerful Ozma is. She's leading this whole army. Here for the viewers at home, she's leading this whole army. My favorite John Arneal. The cover has a version of this. I don't know what. It doesn't quite. I think it's from the 80s. It looks very 80s. Especially Ozma's hair. It looks very 80s. I don't know. That's a version of it, but it doesn't quite look as awesome as John Arneal's version. Indeed, the girl felt herself as good as rescued as soon as she recognized those in the procession. for she well knew the courage and loyalty of her old comrades, and also believed that any others who came from their marvelous country would prove to be pleasant and reliable acquaintances. As soon as the last bit of desert was passed, and all the procession from the beautiful and dainty Ozma to the last soldier had reached the grassy meadows of the land of Ev, the magic carpet rolled itself together and entirely disappeared. Then the chariot driver turned her lion and tiger into a broad roadway leading up to the palace, and the others followed while Dorothy still gazed from her tower window in eager excitement. They came quite close to the front door of the palace and then halted, the Scarecrow dismounting from his sawhorse to approach the sign fastened to the door that he might read what it said. Dorothy, just above him, could keep silent no longer. "Here I am," she shouted as loudly as she could. "Here's Dorothy." "Dorothy who?" asked the Scarecrow. "Dorothy who?" Tipping his head to look upward until he nearly lost his balance and tumbled over backwards. "Dorothy Gale, of course, your friend from Kansas," she answered. "Why, hello, Dorothy," said the Scarecrow. "What in the world are you doing up there?" "Nothing," she called down. Because there's nothing to do. Save me, my friend, save me." "You seem to be quite safe now," replied the Scarecrow. "But I'm a prisoner. I'm locked in so that I can't get out," she pleaded. "That's all right," said the Scarecrow. "You might be worse off, little Dorothy. Just consider the matter. You can't get drowned or be run over by a wheeler or fall out of an apple tree. Some folks would think they were lucky to be up there." What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're kind of. Who is it?
It's the Scarecrow talking to her.
Well, I guess he still needs some brains.
I guess so. But that happens with the Scarecrow. He's a very smart character, but he also says dumb things constantly. But that's the thing with all the characters. They're inconsistent in many ways. Well, I don't, declared the girl, and I want to get down immediately and see you and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion. "Very well," said the Scarecrow, nodding. "It shall be just as you say, little friend. Who locked you up?" "The Princess Langwidere, who is a horrid creature," she answered. At this, Ozma, who had been listening carefully to the conversation, called to Dorothy from her chariot, asking, "Why did the princess lock you up, my dear?" "Because," exclaimed Dorothy, "I wouldn't let her have my head for her collection and take an old cast-off head in exchange for it." "I do not blame you," exclaimed Ozma promptly. "I will see the princess at once." "What's that?"
Oh, it's from the sword.
Yeah, there you go. Is it the Sword of Gryffindor? That's from and I'll explain it later.
Pulled out the sword of the stone is.
It's Excalibur.
Is.
I'll explain it later.
The quite wise king born of all England.
Yeah, it's Excalibur. I will explain it later. Okay. Are you listening? Okay, yes. Just slash with your sword as long as you're listening. "Oh, thank you very much," cried Dorothy, who, as soon as she heard the sweet voice of the girlish ruler of Oz, knew that she would soon learn to love her dearly. Ozma now drove her chariot around the third door of the wing, upon which the Tin Woodman boldly proceeded to knock. As soon as the maid opened the door, Ozma, bearing in her hand her ivory wand, stepped into the hall and made her way at once to the drawing room, followed by all her company except the lion and the tiger. And the 27 soldiers made such a noise and a clatter that the little maid Nanda ran away screaming to her mistress, whereupon the Princess Langwidere, roused to a great anger by their rude invasion of her palace, came running into the drawing room without any assistance whatsoever. There she stood before the slight and delicate form of the little girl from Oz and cried out, "How dare you enter my palace unbidden? Leave this room at once, or I will bind you and all your people in chains and throw you into my darkest dungeons." "What a dangerous lady," murmured the Scarecrow in a soft voice. "She seems a little nervous," replied the Tin Man. But Ozma only smiled at the angry princess. "Because she's cool too." "Sit down, please," she said quietly. "I have traveled a long way to see you, and you must listen to what I have to say." That's Ozma. She tells people what to do. Must, screamed the princess, her black eyes flashing with fury, for she still wore her number 17 head. Must to me? To be sure, said Ozma, I am the ruler of the land of Oz, and I am powerful enough to destroy all your kingdom if I so wish. Yet I did not come here to do harm, but rather to free the royal family of Ev from the thrall of the Gnome King. The news having reached me that he is holding the queen and her children prisoner. Hearing these words, Langwidere suddenly became quiet. I wish you could indeed free my aunt and her 10 royal children, said she eagerly, for if they were restored to the proper forms and station, they could rule the kingdom of Ev themselves, and that would save me a lot of worry and trouble. At present, there are at least 10 minutes every day that I must devote to affairs of state, and I would like to be able to spend my whole time in admiring my beautiful heads. What do you think of that?
I think she's right that she doesn't have to spend all her time looking at the
heads of people she stole.
People that she decapitated.
I know. That's horrible. But she's the ruler of Ev, and she only spends 10 minutes every day just being a ruler. Is that enough time to be a ruler?
No, you have to be like 20. You have to be like 20.
At least 20 minutes.
Yeah, that whole like 20. Well, I was going to say 23 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that would make much more sense. But, I mean, you got to sleep for 8 hours.
True.
You should sleep for 8 hours to be healthy. So, 8 hours, let's say 8 hours a day for a ruler might be pretty good, but she only spends 10 hours a day. I mean, 10 minutes a day.
I am metal bender.
You are metal bender.
I can bend this actually.
So, how would you describe Princess Langwidere?
Cruel.
Cruel.
Really, really mad at everything.
Yeah.
She gets mad at people.
Short-tempered. Yeah.
Yeah, short-tempered.
Yeah. So is she a hard worker?
No.
What's the opposite of that?
Lazy.
She's lazy. Yeah. What about that? Why does she steal the heads? What does she really want from stealing the heads? Beauty. So how would you describe that? You know the word for that?
No.
She's vain. She's full of herself. She's superficial. There's a lot of words for that. But vain is probably a good one. Vain, like V-A-I-N, vain. It's probably a good one for her. But anyway, let's see. We'll get through this chapter. Then we'll get to the Hungry Tiger chapter. He's an interesting character for sure.
Does he eat people?
He tries. That's why he's hungry. He tries not to.
Oh.
If you think about that, that's his conflict in the story. He really, really wants to eat people, but he feels really guilty. But anyway, let's see. I'm the ruler of Oz. I am powerful enough to destroy your whole kingdom. I like that line. Hearing these words, Langwidere suddenly became quiet. There you go. Then we will presently discuss this matter, said Ozma, and try to find a way to liberate your aunt and cousins. But first you must liberate another prisoner, the little girl you have locked up in your tower. Of course, said Langwidere readily. I had forgotten all about her. That was yesterday, and a princess cannot be expected to remember today what she did yesterday. Come with me, and I will release the prisoner at once. So Ozma followed her, and they passed up the stairs that led to the room in the tower. While they were gone, Ozma's followers remained in the drawing room, and the Scarecrow was leaning against a form that he had mistaken for a copper statue, when a harsh metallic voice said suddenly in his ear, "Get off of my foot, please. You are scratching my polish." "Oh, excuse me," he replied, hastily drawing back. "Are you alive?" "No," said Tick-Tock. "I am only a machine, but I can think and speak and act when I am properly wound up. Just now my action is run down, and Dorothy has the key to it." "That's all right," replied the Scarecrow. "Dorothy will soon be free, and then she'll attend to your works. But it must be a great misfortune not to be alive. I'm sorry for you." "Why?" asked Tick-Tock. "Because you have no brains, as I have," said the Scarecrow. "Oh, yes, I have," returned Tick-Tock. "I am fitted with Smith & Tinker's Improved.
Improved?
Improved combination steel brains. They are what make me think. What sort of brains are you fitted with? I don't know, admitted the Scarecrow. They were given to me by the Great Wizard of Oz, and I didn't get a chance to examine them before he put them in. But they work splendidly, and my conscience is very active. You are also very active. There we go. Okay. They were, but my conscience is very active. So I mean, this is just a side note, but the whole idea of book one is that the Scarecrow thinks he needs a physical brain. The wizard gives him something that is just a fake physical brain, and he thinks he's received it. But really, he's growing in intelligence, and what he really needs is confidence. So he has a total mistake about what he actually needs. But we see here, he's still not really aware of that. By book three, when he's talking about his intelligence, he thinks it comes from the placebo that the wizard gave him. Do you know what a placebo is?
No.
It's so if a doctor gives you fake medicine, but you think it's real medicine, that's called a placebo. Doctors don't usually do that. That's just sort of in tests and things like that. But he got this placebo. He got a fake brain from the wizard. He still thinks that's what works. But his actual problem is solved. His actual problem is his confidence. He has plenty of confidence now. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. We're almost done with this chapter. Very soon. Okay. Have you a conscience? No, said TikTok. And no heart, I suppose, added the Tin Woodman, the Tin Man, who had been listening with interest in this conversation. No, said TikTok. Then continued the Tin Woodman, I regret to say that you are greatly inferior to my friend the Scarecrow and to myself, for we are both alive. He has brains, which do not need to be wound up, while I have an excellent heart that is continually beating in my bosom. I congratulate you, replied TikTok. I cannot help being your inferior, for I am a mere machine. When I am wound up, I do my duty by going just as my machinery is made to go. You have no idea how full of machinery I am. And there's another thing. Those two are constantly arguing about whether or not brains or hearts make you superior. They still want to be superior to TikTok. So it's a utopia. I mean, this is kind of the complicated thing in calling it a utopia. It's a utopia, but they're still being very hierarchical about their perspective on others. But I would chalk that up to them just being complicated characters. And Baum does have inconsistencies pretty constantly. But anyway. And Ozma tried to teach him about the riches of content, which I think is one of the important chapters on Ozma. And the riches of content is basically, doesn't matter what kind of riches you have. If you're a good person on the inside, that's what really matters. That's sort of the big lesson at the end of book two. But they're still, and that's in response to them bickering about whether or not hearts or brains are better. She says, what does it really matter as long as you have the riches of content? And they're still bickering about it and trying to make themselves superior to others. They'll never learn. I can guess, said the Scarecrow. I congratulate you. So, and then TikTok has no interest in being superior to anyone else. He's okay with being a machine. He's very contented with his position. I can guess, said the Scarecrow, looking at the machine man curiously. Someday, I'd like to take you apart and see just how you're made. Do not do that, I beg you, said TikTok, for you could not put me together again, and my usefulness would be destroyed. Oh, are you useful? Asked the Scarecrow, surprised. Very, said TikTok. In that case, the Scarecrow kindly promised, I won't fool with your interior at all, for I am a poor mechanic and might mix you up. Thank you, said TikTok. Just then, Ozma re-entered the room, leading Dorothy by the hand, not Neely. There was a Freudian slip, leading her by the hand, and followed closely by the Princess Langwidere. So we'll wrap that up for today. We're almost at an hour anyway. But, whenever Dorothy encounters a villain, and this is true of Ozma too, whenever either of them encounter a villain, they respond in a very different way than your traditional sort of heroic character in a story like this responds. How would a hero normally react to a villain who's threatening to steal heads?
They would try to beat her up.
Yeah, if she's trying to decapitate them, they would probably try to decapitate her. Beat her up, throw her in jail or something like that. So how did Dorothy and Ozma respond?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Why has nobody threw her in jail?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about some of the villains. Dorothy and Ozma have this tendency to kind of just let it go most of the time. Not with the Wicked Witch of the West, of course. She was murdered by Dorothy with water. I mean, that's arguable, but yeah, I mean, not the Wicked Witch of the West, but General Ginger certainly, Mombi in book 2, Ozma kind of just let everything go. Very forgiving. But I would say, arguably, if you have a situation with Princess Langwidere, I mean, this is another deep question. This will be our last deep question. There are a lot of deep questions in this section. Deep question. Forgiveness is wonderful and amazing and awesome, and it's a great model for leadership and what have you. But at the same time, Princess Langwidere is decapitating people and wearing their heads just for her vanity. Are we just going to let her go, not throw her in jail?
Yeah, I mean, you just let her decapitate people.
Well, I'm just saying, it's not an easy question. It's a complicated question. But I'm just throwing that out there. Is that really the best response? Certainly Ozma and Dorothy are models for good behavior, for sure. But, how far does that really go?
and less a chance of coronavirus.
Well, people are actually throwing that question out there. I don't have an actual answer for it.
Don't kill people just because.
That's horrible. Don't kill people for any reason at all.
Coronavirus is better than killing people.
Well, I mean, quarantining.
Well, coronavirus. I don't know.
There's much less of a chance, but still, I mean, it's very dangerous, no matter what. But there's nothing. I mean, if you're talking about, there is a complicated question. This comes up on Star Trek all the time, by the way. Is a virus immoral?
Thank you.
Here's your purpose. And exposing others by to decapitate more people. Would Ozma then be morally culpable for that? These are deep questions, not things that we can answer in one sitting. But I'll leave that to you to think about. And see you on the next episode.
Adios. Hello.